Africa Prime, brought to you by Jamison's Select Reserve.
She sits at the head of Blue IQ, the Gauteng government's agency set up to deliver strategic economic infrastructure to catalyse sustainable economic growth and to influence the diversification of Gauteng's GDP. She's also spent a stint in the 2010 Fifa Soccer World Cup local organising committee, and before then had overseen the completion of South Africa's high-speed trail flagship project, the Gautrain. She is Amanda Nair. She's the CEO of Blue IQ. Thank you so very much, Amanda, for joining us. It's great to have you on Africa Prime. Tell us about some of the successes that you've experienced over the past while being the head of Blue IQ.
Perhaps just to say that we are in a transition process as we talk. What the Provincial Executive Committee of the province have decided to do is to merge Blue IQ as well as the Gauteng Economic Development Agency, and hopefully in the next month we will see the formation, the establishment of an entity called the Gauteng Growth and Economic Development Agency. But I thought that was just an aside, and I should say that, you know, we're in a process of transition and change, and we will move to the GGDA, which is very exciting. Just to talk about some of the things that I think we can reflect on in the era of Blue IQ, some of which is some things I can take credit for, and some things obviously my predecessors. But I think some of the key economic infrastructure projects in the province, like the Mandela Bridge, like Kliptown Square, Dinokeng, the Cradle, and some that have continued through under the auspices of Blue IQ, like the Innovation Hub, the Automotive Supply Park in Roslyn, Constitution Hill, and our legacy project of the Newtown precinct, are ones that, you know, have been, I think, iconic for the province from an economic infrastructure point of view, but also will continue to add value into the future. Just from the perspective of during my tenure, I think some of the things that you know, may perhaps not directly reflect on the strategic economic infrastructure agenda, but I think in a government agency contribute quite significantly to the success of that agency, is what I like to call public integrity. Yeah. It's about having organizations within government that are well run, well managed, accountable, transparent, and where the citizens of our province and our country can be confident that the work that those agencies do and the departments do.
And that's quite interesting that you mentioned that, because we know that Blue IQ did suffer reputational damage. I know that you joined in 2009. Just tell us about how you actually, because I hear also a transition occurring in a sense to ensure that there is a lot of responsibility that is had by the organizations and the departments within government, but then also the leaders that take that on do ensure that confidence is built.
Yeah. In addition to us losing a lot of traction around a well-governed entity, there was traction lost around the agenda of the mandate of the agency, which is the development of strategic economic infrastructure, catalyzing and facilitating it, not just directly, but through FDI, through DDI, and through other interventions. I think coming into 2009, certainly an acknowledgement on the part of the political leadership of the province that we needed to effect some level of fixing here. So there were two pillars, if you like, that we attacked it on. One was around the governance issues. There were issues of financial management and poor audit outcomes and poor audit performance. There were issues around, I think, capacity within the organization, human resource capacity, and how the capacity matched the need to deliver and the strategic agenda of the organization. Issues around internal governance at the board level as well as within the organization. So I think that was one block of elements that we got very quickly into and started to turn those elements around.
I mean, what was the biggest sort of legacy issue that you experienced when you did, go to Blue IQ and say, well, now we're going to implement change?
I think the biggest negative legacy was the audit performance. From the time Blue IQ was established as an entity to about 2010, the audit
Blue IQ started in 2001, essentially.
It's formally established in 2003, but effectively, actually late 1990s, the Strategic Economic Investment Infrastructure Program of the province was launched, SEEP, which was essentially the beginning of Blue IQ, and within the Finance and Economic Development Department at the time, allocations were made for the range of projects that that we've talked about. And those then morphed into the need to establish a structure, which then became Blue IQ. But I think the big thing, and for me personally, coming from an environment where I didn't manage the finances of the organization, you always have a CFO to do that, and to take on the responsibility and the role to turn that disclaimed audit opinion around. It's quite a significant job.
So how exactly did you do that, Amanda? I mean, what was the first step that you actually took? Obviously surround yourself with the right people, so I'm sure you got yourself a very strong CFO.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
I think the first thing that in addition to making sure you've got the right people around you, particularly in the areas where you yourself don't have strong skill sets, you know, I haven't actually discovered any other recipe for getting things right except hard work. Obviously one has to think through what one does, but it's fine to think it through and conceptualize it, but if you don't roll up your sleeves and actually get into the ruck yourself, particularly on such an issue, it's unlikely to succeed. And I think giving leadership in such an issue, you've got to lead from the front. So the very first thing was to understand why a disclaimer over the whole life of the organization, and then to start a program.
So what were some of the findings as to why there was just such poor auditing that was occurring at Blue IQ?
You know, I think if you look at government agencies, I think often when they're set up in an environment where you've got to comply with a whole range of Companies Act requirements, and you layer that over with the Public Finance Management Act requirements. So it can be quite a complex undertaking. So we often set them up, but when we do, we get the work done, but we don't have the right systems and processes in place to make sure that the financial management, the detailed financial management is in place. So, for example, if money comes in, it must go into the bank account, it must be properly accounted for, you must have the right paperwork, etc., etc. So it's quite simple things like that, but I think we often run off in a direction without actually putting in place those systems. And 5 years down the line, trying to work out exactly what happened in a project like Constitution Hill, where millions and hundreds of millions of rands needed to be accounted for.
I mean, was there a lot of money that was actually lost over that period? And we're talking about these flagship projects, which obviously cost billions of rands.
The money was not lost. The money was not well accounted for. And one of the things that we had to do in 2009 is to go back into the archives, dig out information, look through boxes and boxes of records, and work out exactly how all of this had happened so the financials could be corrected.
So it's about some of the, I know that you're focusing predominantly on the freight hubs. I think there's 3 that are going to actually be created around Gauteng. Give us an indication of budget allocations now. We're talking about big projects in the past and flagship projects which really defined Blue IQ and also really defined the Gauteng province. What kind of budget allocations are we looking at now, and how does it differ to that of the past?
Look, I think if you look at the late 1990s and early 2000s in our province, if I can use popular terminology, we were pretty cash flush. There was a lot of resources, financial resources in the fiscus that were available. So if you look at that particular period of Blue IQ, there were significant allocations to a range of projects, including the Gautrain. If my memory served me correctly, I'd say we had about in excess of 2 billion rand. The financial situation of the province has changed. The challenges have changed. The demands on the fiscus have changed. So you come into the current era and you're quite constrained. So in real terms and in terms of direct allocations, they're limited. But what we look to do then is to augment our financial resources and leverage off what the private sector can come to the party with. I think it has the benefit as well of creating opportunities for investors to come in and also partner with government to develop. So it would be great if you had a lot more money to go out and do what we did in the late 1990s, the early 2000s. However, the current circumstances don't allow that. So we've become quite inventive. We'll also use facilities like our development financing institutions within government to help us as well. For example, we have a great relationship with the Jobs Fund, and we are using that relationship to assist us with augmenting the project finance structuring elements.
I mean, since 2009, have you been focusing more so? I know that obviously you need to fix a lot of things internally before you can actually go out there and spend. So tell us about some of the key projects that have occurred over, you know, the 2000 period until now. I mean, have you predominantly been focusing on slightly smaller projects?
No, I don't think that would actually benefit us tremendously as a province. Obviously, there are always little things that one does, but if I can just talk about some of the big things that we are doing, I think our freight logistics program is a
that's set to be completed in 2020
in totality.
Yeah,
I mean that's a form and shape changer for our province. That program successfully implemented will change the landscape of the movement of freight and goods in our province. The other, I think, extremely significant element of our freight logistics program is that it is a program, yes, that's rooted in the province locationally and geographically, but it has an impact on the entire country and the SADC region, and potentially ensuring that our gateway into Africa status is asserted and expanded going forward. So it has a huge ability to transform everything that goes on generally in our country.
Although in its early phase, I mean, what kind of money are you expected to actually put into this project? I mean, as we mentioned, 3 freight hubs.
Well, if you look at the one that is probably the most advanced in terms of on the implementation radar, which is the one at Tambo Springs, which is as you come up around Heidelberg where the petrol ports are. You're probably looking at a total investment in excess of R1 billion, which includes the infrastructure, the development on the site, the enhancements to the rail infrastructure to link it into the transit system. So it's a huge project. A lot of that financing will come from the private sector. It is a private sector-led development. Our role is Blue IQ. I said at some point in this interview that we invest directly, we catalyse and we facilitate. So our role in respect of Tambo Springs and the freight hubs generally would be to catalyse and facilitate. So we play a role, we partner with the developers as well as with the key municipalities that are involved, which is Ekurhuleni as well as Johannesburg. Johannesburg insofar as we need to ensure that the link with City Deep Kazani is maintained to Tambo Springs, because Kazani City Deep will continue to have a role going forward. Key player as well and a key partner is Transnet as well. National Department of Transport, the Provincial Department of Roads and Transport, that is the overall coordinator of the freight program in the province. So you're looking at significant investment. I don't think the private sector would be as enthusiastic as they are on this particular kind of project if there wasn't value. So I think there are enormous opportunities going forward. We're
going to hit pause on that thought, and we're going to a very short break. When we come back, we continue our conversation with Amanda Nair, the CEO of Blue IQ. Don't go anywhere.